This week on The Land Doctors, Kelly takes a look at the J.T. Nickel Family Nature and Wildlife Preserve. This preserve is home to several different types of wildlife, but they're famous for their large population of elk. First, Dr. Hurt will speak with Jermey Tubbs, Preserve Director at the J.T. Nickel Family Preserve, and we'll take a look at some gorgeous land and possibly a sighting. Later, we'll head down to the more unique parts of the property and meet with show regular Mike Fuhr to discuss some of the things that the Wildlife Preserve is doing to help preserve these majestic animals and nature in general.
The Nickel Preserve is 17,000 acres. Before it became owned by the Nature Conservancy, John Nickel owned it, and he bought it in the late 80s. And John donated the land to the Nature Conservancy, right around 14,000 acres. And the Nature Conservancy has bought some in-holdings and some pieces along the edge that has brought our total up to about 17,000 acres now.
You know, without the efforts of the Nature Conservancy, we wouldn't be seeing things like this and hearing what we've heard this morning, which I love the bugling. That's a thrill to me just to hear that in the Oklahoma woods, you know?
Yeah, it's very majestic.
Yeah. So how did this all get started up here?
Well, in 2005, one of we had a donation of an elk herd to the Nature Conservancy to reintroduce an elk herd to the Ozarks and to eastern Oklahoma. And we started out with 20 elk, and now we're at about 50.
Yeah.
And they're free ranging on the 17,000 acres. They're also being free ranging. They can leave the preserve.
Yeah.
They're owned by the state now. And you know, it's been a real great attraction to the preserve. We get a lot of people wanting to come out and see the elk.
Yeah.
And then right now, as you talked about earlier, some of the bugling we heard, people want to come out and hear a bugle, and just to be out here early in the morning, as you said, and hear that in the distance is really something.
So do you think that they'll continue to spread and we'll have indigenous elk, you know, as a fairly common thing in this part of the world? Or?
Well, I would like to see that. I mean, as the herd grows, I really feel like the carrying capacity of the preserve is around 75 animals. I mean, I think we can keep that.
So you're about halfway there now?
A little more than halfway. We've got it close to 50.
So this is a pretty impressive rub here. I was looking at it, it goes up to about there, so about 8 feet tall. And he's been gouging it with his horns, and it's got shavings everywhere.
Yeah, got a little hair in it over here.
Oh, right there?
Mm-hmm.
Neat. Way down there is the Illinois River. We're on Goats Bluff. You have my attention. What am I going to learn today?
Well, we're standing on the J.T. Nickel Preserve, which is owned by the Nature Conservancy. We're going to spend a little bit of time getting to know this 17,000 acre nature preserve, a little bit about how the Nature Conservancy does things, and how we use a place like this to advance conservation.
Awesome. Let's take off. Let's do it.
All right, let's go.
Well, Mike, that's certainly a beautiful waterfall behind us. And this whole little creek and everything is gorgeous. And the motto of the Nature Conservancy is saving the last great places. And I think this one certainly qualifies. So tell me, how does the Nature Conservancy work to do that sort of thing?
Well, the Nature Conservancy is a not-for-profit, and we are a science-based, collaborative organization. Landowners, government agencies, tribes, individuals, whatever it takes to figure out solutions to conservation challenges. And we're standing here on our J.T. Nickel Preserve, which is a real important part of what we do, is our nature preserve. We like to use them to conserve really special places that have rare plants or animals or habitats, but more importantly, even our big places are just a postage stamp in the whole grand scheme of things. And that means we need to use our places as a laboratory, if you will, where we can determine what the solutions might be and then use that to encourage others to try and do the same thing, things that'll benefit the wildlife habitat on the property, maybe even benefit the agricultural production, maybe the grazing on the property. So it's about finding those solutions that are going to be around a long time, so it's going to work for people and for nature.
Well, I know one of them that you've been working a lot on is prescribed fire.
Yep.
And have you been using that here?
Prescribed fire, really, really important in the Ozarks. These forests and woodlands are adapted to fire. Yeah. And if you look at fire history, these woods probably burned every 3 to 5 years historically through lightning strikes, through Native Americans lighting fires. And then, here comes Smokey the Bear.
Yeah.
Probably one of the best marketing campaigns ever. And it really scared people. People no longer use fire because they're scared of wildfires. And what happened is, we saw that 3 to 5 years go down to once every 25 or 30 years here. And that really changes the amount of trees you have here, what the habitat looks like. And so we spent the last 10 years reintroducing fire here. And it's going to be a long restoration process, but we've got to continually add fire to the landscape here in order to take it back to where it was, over 100 years ago.
So when you wait 20 years between fires, you have an incredible buildup of fuel. So I have to imagine that was dangerous on the first burn or two.
It can be, but it's a prescribed fire, which means we have a very strict set of parameters that we're going to look at before we ever light the fire. We want to make sure that we keep it under control and make it safe, and also meet the long-term goals that we have. So if the conditions aren't right, we're not going to light the match.
You just don't burn.
That's right.
That's the way to do it. That's what I love about the Nature Conservancy, is it does take into account that people are part of the equation, and it has to work for the landowners as well. And that, you guys are basically running an outdoor laboratory.
Yeah.
Where you're trying things and you're seeing what works for everyone, and then those practices get adopted. But I guess one of the questions that I have is, how can people work with the Nature Conservancy? How do you interact with the Nature Conservancy if you're a Joe Q public?
Right, that's a great question. There's a lot of different ways. Of course, we're not for profit, so if people are interested in our work and supporting our work, donations are always really important to us. If they're a landowner and they're interested in learning more about what we're doing and how they can manage their property to benefit wildlife habitat, that's what these places are for. Like I said, this is a laboratory. People can come to these places and learn a lot about what they might be able to do with their land. Lastly, I think that just spreading the word about conservation is really important too. If they like what we do, they're a supporter, and they have benefited from some of our work, maybe they've implemented prescribed fire on their property, just sharing that information with other landowners or people they know goes a long way. Word of mouth is probably a lot better than any advertising campaign could ever be.
What if I had a great piece of property that was in one of your focus areas? Could I donate a conservation easement? Absolutely.
Conservation easements are a great tool where a landowner actually can donate a certain part of the rights to that property so that it's conserved in perpetuity. So they want to see that particular piece of property stay the same way for their grandkids or their grandkids. This is a great way to lock up their hunting property or the place that they have their cabin so that it is conserved for future generations. And conservation easements are a great way to do that. We buy property from people. Sometimes people donate fee title to us, but as you can imagine, there's a lot of people that we approach that they just don't want to sell their land. They love their land too. So conservation easement is a great way to help out and do something for the long term.
So if I donate a conservation easement to you, is there any benefit to me financially?
There can be. Basically, those rights that are donated to the Conservancy have a value. And so that value can be assessed or appraised.
Right.
And then that monetary value is then deductible through the federal income tax laws. So it's the same as donating cash of that amount. So it's a great way to do something good for nature and at the same time, potentially get some good tax benefits.
Most of these properties, they're like laboratories for you, and they're private donations. How much opportunity does the public have to come on these properties and walk around and view things?
Yeah, great question. Most of our places have some trails that the public can stop, pull off the side of the road or in a parking lot and walk the trail and see a part of what this place is supposed to be conserving. So we try and do that as much as possible. We recognize that we can't just have places and keep people off it. That doesn't make any sense.
Yeah.
So we want people to see these places, and just about all of our places where we have staff, there's that kind of availability. Some of our smaller places that are hard to get to, or we don't have a staff person, we typically will just have scheduled hikes with staff that know the place, so they can get taken on a special tour of the place that maybe isn't open to the public all the time.
So Mike, where can we go for more information on the Nature Conservancy?
We've got a really good webpage. It's nature.org/Oklahoma. And that'll take you to the page that's all about our places here in Oklahoma. Nature.org, if you have interest in finding out where we're working around the world, we're in all 50 states and something like 36 countries. Nature.org is a great place to learn about our work.
Well, I really appreciate you coming out. I love this place. I love that waterfall.
Me too. It's one of my favorite places.
And I'm glad that you're saving these last great places.
Thank you. Appreciate it. Thanks, Kelly.